Hello, I'm Julie Swenson, Managing Director of Forward Theater Company in Madison, Wisconsin.
And I'm Mike Fisher, Milwaukee-based theater writer and dramaturg.
And I'm Jen Uphoff-Gray, founder and artistic director of Forward Theater Company. And this is Theater Forward, a monthly conversation about theater from a local, regional, and national perspective. From Madison to Manhattan, we're excited to share insights into our own company while exploring issues surrounding theater in the Midwest and around the country. Welcome to episode 130 of Theater Forward.
Great to be here.
Yes, and in this episode, we want to talk about the changing landscape for theater marketing. With print journalism shrinking, arts criticism disappearing, and social media changing up the rules practically daily, there is no such thing as a stable marketing plan anymore. And joining us for this conversation is our own Scott Haden, Theater Forward producer and Forward Theater's Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome, Scott.
It's a pleasure to be on the other side of the microphone. Thank you.
Yay!
Nice to be here.
Indeed.
Great.
So, Scott, let's just talk for those who don't know you. Just tell us what brought you to this place and this position here with Forward Theater.
Well, contrary to popular belief, I didn't always dream of being a marketing director. My dreams started on stage. I worked as an actor for about 15 years, based in Chicago and eventually Wisconsin. And during that time, like many actors, I spent a lot of time not acting. And in between gigs, I took a wide variety of temp jobs. And during that time, for about 2 years, I got to work with this big advertising agency in downtown Chicago. And while I was there, I kind of discovered this creative side of me that I hadn't really tapped into. And it inspired me to pursue other ways of exploring ideas and telling stories and honestly just having fun. And so I started to just use those temp jobs to learn all of these administrative skills and software and also creative software and things that I would eventually use to express myself, like songwriting and audio recording and video. And eventually down the road, my wife and I decided we wanted to start a family, and an actor's salary wasn't quite cutting it. And so I kind of fell into a job with a summer stock company where I was running the box office and managing the house and doing all the things. But I was also in charge of their social media account and all their promotional stuff. And I worked with a local designer to create posters and playbills. And I kind of learned all those things. And that's where I cut my teeth. But that's kind of where I discovered a place to put all of those tools to work. So when the communications job opened up at Forward Theater, I applied, and here I sit.
Lucky us.
Yay.
And that was a little while ago.
That was 2013.
Yeah. Look at us now. Lucky 13.
We're all grown up.
All grown up.
Scott, I've been doing this even longer than you. And it used to be, honest to goodness, I mean, it's not to simplify it completely, but you sent a postcard out. You had maybe a preview in the paper. What? And a brochure, and people came to shows. First of all, we're not doing previews are really hard to come by. Print advertising is we can buy ads, but who's getting those papers, those periodicals? How does that change for you? How has, since the time you started to now, how do you look at the world of print advertising?
It's so interesting. It's actually changed a couple of times. I feel like when I started, I was still in the middle of that golden age of where you could just put some ads in the newspaper and maybe do a Facebook post and you were good to go.
Yeah.
And that has really changed because there are so many more ways to get information, and print is just one of many. And it's also not as popular as it used to be. So it's fascinating to see how we actually kind of went away from print for a little while when everybody really thought that social media and digital was the only way. And now it almost feels like we've kind of started to circle back just a little bit. And now we're trying to find the value in reaching people in those places as well. So it's been really fascinating because you you want to spend money on ads. You want to reach people where they're at. I know people do still read the newspaper, but it's really hard to quantify that. And we live in an age when data is so valuable. But that's data that's just it's really hard to obtain. So it's hard to spend money when you don't know whether or not it's effective. And that's kind of where print falls right now. It's something we all still feel like we have to do, but it's really hard to justify it
Well,
sometimes.
and I think even just when you think about Madison, Wisconsin specifically, when I moved back here, 20 something years ago, there were two daily print papers and at least one print weekly. One of those daily papers became a weekly print paper, and the weekly print paper it went away for a while and then became a monthly print paper. So there's less.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is, and I find that we tend to. It's funny, we do a lot of digital advertising with newspapers, so we don't do print ads with them. We actually stick with only their digital stuff. So
It's funny, it's related to something I'm wrestling with, which is the decline of arts journalism and arts criticism. But part of the problem is the people who get a print newspaper, like yours truly, it still lands on my doorstep every morning. Yes, are disproportionately older, and yet those are people who also are disproportionately invested in the arts. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it just is. And so their reading of stuff isn't getting captured by clicks, which means it's not something that could be translated into ad dollars, which means that papers like that, you know, corporations that are running these newspapers are increasingly less inclined to invest in print journalism because they can't measure it. So long way of getting at what for me is sort of an ongoing crisis. You've all been hearing me whine about this for 7 years, the decline of arts critics and journalism. I see it, from an aesthetic standpoint, it's a flaming disaster. But Scott, from a marketing standpoint, what does it mean that you don't have the number of reviews or previews that you once did of the work that we're putting on stage?
well, it's interesting because we just talked about how valuable digital is and how everyone's kind of going into that, and yet we still find ourselves chasing after reviews and previews. So there's still something about it that we know is valuable, and I think it also comes down to your audience. So every city is going to be different. But we live in an area where I know for a fact that there is a demographic that still gets that newspaper. I always tell myself, as long as my in-laws are still getting the Wisconsin State Journal, I will keep advertising in the Wisconsin State Journal. Um, but I also, it's interesting. You talk about critics. I want to take a moment and just shout out and pay tribute to Terry Teachout. Uh, that was someone that I feel like carried a torch for theater criticism and was really a model for embracing theater all across the country. And I think that in and of itself inspired a lot of people to write about theater. And I think you can see the decline start when he passed, and I think we still feel that now. Um, I think it goes back to what you said, Mike. It's about data. It's really hard to know if that preview is reaching people, and it's also about staffing. I know newspapers they have a harder time getting writers to either have them permanent or maybe they don't have the budget. And so it's a lot of freelance work. And those freelance reporters they can't just report on the arts. They have to report on the arts and they have to report on food and they have to report
Hmm.
on politics. And so their lives and schedules are stretched so thin, it can be really hard to get them to commit to just, to write about a play. And in today's day and age, it's kind of hard to get a writer really excited about a play when there's some pretty kind of crazy stuff going on around the world. So
Well,
Can I
sort of.
can I
Go
interject
ahead.
very
Yeah.
quickly, just an aside? I do want to give credit where it's due. Lindsay Christians at Cap Times has been supportive of the arts since I've been here, but she's kind of alone right now in writing
Mhm.
reviews, except for the Daily Cardinal, the UW Madison paper, which is churning out unbelievably good critics. Mike, if you haven't read the work of Eloise Slipper, please do. She's fantastic.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up
Yeah.
because two things. One, because Lindsay definitely deserves a nod because she's the one person that has been doing this since I've been doing this. I've seen a lot of writers sort of come and go in Madison, but Lindsay has been a mainstay, and we've had some conversations about it. She's talked about how hard it is to get a freelance person to write those previews, and then have that be of a consistent quality and make sure that you have the same person coming back, and that maybe that young writer moves on to something else and they're no longer available, and now that voice has to be replaced with a different voice. And so to see a younger generation of writers kind of getting inspired by the arts and by theater is wonderful. I'm so glad you brought up the Daily
Well, and
Cardinal. They're
I
great.
do want to, if we're shouting out the folks who are really doing good work, I also want to just say kudos to Isthmus, which is now monthly in terms of print here in Madison, but has regular digital content. And they don't have a regular single person doing all of the arts reviews, someone like Lindsay, but they have been working really hard and quite successfully to bring in a bunch of different freelancers who've been writing some really, really nice pieces covering theater here.
I mean, part of it, and I'll sort of get on the train here from Milwaukee with Jim Higgins, who has, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel is a Gannett newspaper. It's a USA Today newspaper. If you look at USA Today newspapers anywhere in the United States, I defy you to find coverage as good as what we're getting out of Milwaukee. And Jim is doing that. He is already an editor, so he has taken this on in addition to his regular responsibilities. He didn't have to do it, and he covers everything. And the really important thing about somebody like him, who's been doing it now since 2018, or Lindsay, who's been doing it forever, with all due respect to all these younger folks you guys are talking about, is the consistency. So you over the course, it's not just being a smart person who can go in and say something clever about a production. It's somebody who can look at the work of Cassie Bissell and say, wow, I've been watching her do this kind of work for 20 years. It's somebody who can see Marcy Kearns as a director. I'm talking both cases about Ironbound at Forward, and can say, wow, I've watched her growth as a director now for decades, and she is hitting it out of the park. This is a new high. And unless you have people who have had a beat for a long time and have been covering stuff in a sustained way, like Lindsay has, you just don't get that. You can't get that. It's not the person's fault. They just don't have the perspective to offer that. And that puts Scott and or the companies in the position of having to fill in the gaps. Like, people who are new to Forward, they don't know Marcy Kearns from Adam. They just don't. They should, but they don't. And so to give a sense of what she's capable of becomes our job to show, highlight the way in which she has gotten to who she is and what she is.
So Scott, turning those really good points back to you and back to the task of marketing a show and selling tickets to a show with so many fewer preview pieces happening, with fewer reviews happening of each production. What does that mean for you? Like, what are some of the strategies you've had to develop to balance out those losses?
That's such a good question. And I will preface my answer by saying the solutions or the methods that I'm currently using or exploring are really unique to me and to the Dane County area. Whenever I attend conferences or panels, I hear different marketing directors talk about their city, and they have a completely different situation. I know marketing directors that have completely abandoned print and are only going digital, and it pays off. That pays off for them. I don't think that strategy would work for us in Madison, but it does for some other people. So when it comes to marketing a show now, you have to spread yourself. You have to spread yourself out a lot. You've got to put a drop in every bucket, and that's print, and that's digital, and that's social media. But then social media also has its own buckets, and digital kind of has its own little buckets as well. And so you have to spread yourself out. At least in Dane County, I think you've got to spread yourself out, and you also have to ask yourself who your audience is.
Right.
I feel like our attention spans are so short, and we have so many people trying to reach us at all times on our phones, um, that a lot of this just becomes noise. So I think you've got to be really thoughtful about who you are talking to, who you're trying to communicate with. And that changes from show to show. You'll always have your low hanging fruit. You'll always have your evangelical fans. And those are fantastic. But if you want to attract new people, you've got to really start thinking about where you're putting your ads and what you're saying in there, in those ads, and how you're reaching them and what message.
And it's strategic too, based on the play, correct? You don't have the same marketing plan for Gutenberg as you do for Ironbound, for instance. And it used to be,
absolutely.
there's sort of a core group, and now because of what you're saying, and phones and streaming and on, and our competition, which is not other theaters, really. The way you approach each show is a little bit different. Is that correct? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I would say, though, that it's in that regard, it's almost more about social media. And if you want to talk about how you're reaching those audiences, it's about the messaging, it's about the type of imagery that you're using, it's about the types of reels and videos that you're creating. And is the show open to those kinds of things? Is it appropriate to do behind the scenes looks at certain plays? Some are more friendly to that idea, and some are not. Um, it's really a challenge. It's really a challenge because the formula, well, I kind of have a set groundwork that I can apply to each show. You're kind of starting fresh with each one, rethinking about how you're doing this and are we reaching people the right way. Um, it's interesting though, because as digital as we are talking, I always still feel like, mail is one of the most effective ways to reach people now, because it's the one place. I know that we tend to, you get your junk mail, you toss it, but the mail gets in front of your eyes in a way that digital does not, because digital kind of now there is a lot of noise online that you have learned to sort of ignore. And so I'm becoming a big fan of old school postcards, and I do that for every show.
Yeah. I'm with you. Gone are the days when we got, a bunch of letters and do you know what I mean? It's junk until you get the postcard you want. So
I try to
do
make that
think
postcard as big as possible.
exactly.
So
So it's more
miss it.
exciting. And we all still have mailboxes, whether
You can't scroll past a postcard.
right.
Scott, in terms of this attention span issue and scrolling down, in this era where we've all got the attention span of a flea that's drunk on TikTok, how do you deal with the pressure to say something actually substantive? Again, take a show like Ironbound, deep, difficult. I mean, also very funny, but it's not an easy play to sort of put into a soundbite. How in a soundbite era, with any play, even with a Gutenberg, how do you sort of get at the substance of it in a way that might appeal to people? Or is that just a lost cause? Do you just have to sort of count on the show itself to do that and just go with quick hooks?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, when we were doing previews, I knew that there were people in Madison who are reading the newspaper. I mean, Madison is a very specific kind of city where our fans and our audience, they're very engaged, and they'll read everything that we send them, and they'll read the whole thing. So we can be a little more wordy than maybe someone else might be, but it's really challenging, especially at a time when you know that people are just sort of flipping through things. But honestly, this is kind of contrary, and that's why I prefaced it by saying my situation is unique. The research that we've done has shown that social media is actually one of the smallest percentages in terms of turning into ticket sales, transitioning to ticket sales. It makes up a really small, in terms of click through rates and things like that. It's not selling us as many tickets as you might imagine. Whereas when we did Gutenberg, we did have a really heavy social media campaign that went through. We were backstage, but we also did a couple of mailings. Typically, our our production run is only 3 weekends, and that doesn't give you time to do a second mailing. Whereas a lot of other companies, you'll see like much larger companies will do a 6 week run, and they can time it so that they can they could get everybody who already saw the show, take them off of the list, and hit a whole new group of people, uh, and get the word out in that way. Um, but our runs are just short enough. But with Gutenberg, we added a week to the run, and so we had some extra time, and that allowed us to push a little harder, with the second postcard. I also want to shout out, now that I'm talking about it, we are, for those who've listened, or those who may not know, we are a resident company at Overture Center for the Arts. And they have an extremely supportive team of people there who
Mhm.
go out of their way to support the resident companies. And so, for example, for Gutenberg, that's an example of saying like, who would want to see this show other than our fans? And we're fortunate to have a big theater downtown that brings Broadway tours through. So to have access to that, that was a game changer for us.
Mhm.
I'm curious. This is sort of looping us back to social media a little bit, and to your point that it's not converting to as many ticket purchases as folks might think, but it's obviously still a really important part of our marketing strategy for all of our plays. And we talked already about the fact that you're crafting who am I asking the algorithm to target with this ad? How am I going to, is this one a video ad? Is this a behind the scenes ad? Is this a visual? Is this text? Crafting that to each show. But I know from being in an office with you that one of the biggest hurdles that you've had as a marketing director is the way the rules keep changing. The
Mhm.
way those platforms work is constantly evolving. And as soon as you learn how to work the existing system in order to reach the people we want to reach, it changes. Talk about that a little bit.
Like I said, when I first started, it was Facebook. It was putting something on Facebook, and the response was always really strong. Uh, but then it was Facebook and Instagram, and now it's Facebook and Instagram. And we don't do TikTok, but some people do TikTok. But now it's Facebook and Instagram, maybe TikTok, and also LinkedIn, because you've got a lot of people on the business side of things, donors, businesses that are that pay attention to what's going on in the city, and so there's now at least four social media platforms that you have to consider depending on who you're trying to reach. And then within those different platforms, you're right, the rules have completely changed. So there's an entire, not to get it too much into the weeds, but there's an entire back end that Facebook and Instagram have to build all of those ads. And each one has to be a different size and it has to be a certain length. And there's so much that goes into making those ads that um, it's exhausting sometimes just to have to remember what the rules are. And if you misstep here or there, the ad may not perform the way you want it to, or it just, Facebook decides your ad's not good enough to show everybody, and you wonder why those numbers are down, and you're not sure. Um, and yeah, and it changes all the time. So it's one of the more challenging parts about the job for sure.
Or you do a play with a title something like 46 Plays for America's First Ladies, and Meta decides that that's a political advertisement and you can't do it.
Oh my gosh, I completely forgot about that. I'm so glad you brought it up. The two shows that I could not advertise for were Russian Troll Farm.
Obviously.
Uh-huh. Who
and,
decided that?
and 46 Plays for America's First Ladies, because it immediately thought that the plays were these really deep political, that we were trying to push people politically with the ads that we were running. And even though the ads were simply about the fact that the play existed and we were putting it on, the algorithm doesn't understand that. And so there was a lot of advertising that got rejected. I had to be really careful with how I worded my ads, what kind of images I showed. In some ways I had to take the title of the play off the image. There was a lot of things I had to do to kind of sneak a lot of that stuff in. And that was really tricky.
Scott, I feel like, and this is a sort of general trend, but it's got to affect market. Well, I know it affects marketing, but in the last 20 years in particular, and it's maybe the fact that life is so so joyless for so many people on so many days, there has been an increasing emphasis by theaters everywhere on funny. It's like even a dark play, you want to talk about the funny moments in it. Has that changed? Has that changed the way in which is that a conscious thing you think about, sort of trying to remind people that, hey, you're not in for a night of doom and gloom, that even Waiting for Godot is actually a funny play? Or do you just sort of let the chips fall where they may on that?
It's, I used to worry about that a little bit. We worried too much that we were always trying to serve our audience broccoli, and it was hard to sell broccoli online over and over again. But I don't think with us, I don't think that's the case as much. I have found that the more honest we are about what we're doing, the more the audience actually appreciates it. Now, with a play like Ironbound, yes, we used the word funny in the very short description. We used the word darkly funny, was what we said.
Partly because it is talking about
Partly because
honesty.
it
It's a
is.
really funny play.
But I wouldn't be completely genuine if I didn't say that wasn't what you just said, Mike. That wasn't part of the reasoning behind that, because we wanted people to know when you say this is this 22-year span of an immigrant living in America, especially considering what's going on right now, that a lot of people's minds immediately go there, even though this story is completely different. Um, and so, yeah, I did kind of have to go out of my way to make sure I reminded audiences that yes, it's a heavy experience, but there's some joy to be had as well.
Hmm.
One thing I've noticed that we have been doing a bit more, and this is not new or unique to Forward, because actually I saw other theaters and Broadway shows and doing it before we really started. But as the number of different critics reviewing shows has decreased, as the number of preview pieces has decreased, there are fewer kind of professional opinions of what we do out there for us to use in our marketing. We've started to share more often things that people share with us from patrons, from audience members who either post on social media or send us an email saying, this was my experience of the play. And if you don't have a robust critical system where you can get a nice diversity of opinions on a show that you're doing, it's become another tool to talk about a show after it's opened, to help with that word of mouth. And, I've been impressed with the way you utilize that. You want to chat about it a little?
Yeah, it's been a product of necessity, and you kind of said that. Um, I will admit, because of my old school actor life prior to working for Forward Theater. I always felt like you had to have an official opinion to promote a show. You had to have some sort of pull quote from a review, and that would somehow validate uh, the statement that you were offering to the potential audience. Um, I think that we have now reached a point where we are. I consider we are now in the Google Maps phase of media and society. In that you won't go somewhere until you've looked it up on Google Maps and checked how many stars the restaurant or store or wherever it is you want to go to, how many stars it has, and maybe you probably read the first three reviews just to see if their curry is any good. So it's uh, so because of that, I think we have actually trained ourselves to listen to our fellow humans about whether or not something is worth consuming. Um, and it's almost, in a way, I think it's actually really helping theaters in that we are trusting our audience to talk about our shows. And I was going to say, as we were talking about print and digital and where do we put everything, at the end of the day, it's still word of mouth. It's
Mm-hmm.
always word of mouth. I mean, you can do you can say the best things about an average play, and ultimately it's going to have average sales because the audience knows that the play is just okay, and they tell their friends. And it doesn't matter what you say online, it doesn't matter what they see in the newspaper. That might get them interested, but ultimately they're going to listen to their friend about whether or not they might want to see the show.
Hmm.
So I've noticed that a lot of times some of our shows, I almost don't have to advertise in a way. I mean, I know based on the ticket sales, you can just tell people are talking about this show. and they're telling their friends to go, and they respond online, and the engagement is higher. And it's because, you've got a hit, you've got a home run. And so at the end of the day, it really is that. It really is encouraging your audience to talk to each other. And I think we do a pretty good job of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, as it was totally predictable, we've already been chatting about this for a little while. As we start to wrap up, I'm just going to sort of throw to you, Scott. What would you think of are kind of the worst and best parts of your job? Like for you, like what is the hardest thing or most challenging or least fun thing? What's the most rewarding, exciting thing as the marketing and communications director for a small professional theater?
You're not allowed to say that the worst thing is putting up with these people on the podcast.
I was just going to say, it's loaded. It's loaded. Here's his colleagues right here.
This podcast I have to produce. It's the worst. I would say actually that the extra content is the stuff that I really enjoy doing. It's also the most challenging. It takes the most time. And when I talked about all the different buckets that Facebook and Instagram have, and when I said that, I mean, Instagram used to just be put a picture up and people will look at it. But now we have reels and we have stories and we have different types of media. And so video has become it's a huge part of social media now. And I still really like doing that. And even though it's very time intensive and very mentally challenging to do, at the end of the day, it's always really fun to interact with the company, to interact with the actors, to see a different side of them, and then to be able to create something that shows that to our audiences. And I'm just enough of a tech nerd that I also still enjoy, editing a podcast every month and writing copy. I would say the toughest part about the job is, as much as I love being creative is exhausting sometimes. And when you're in a job where you're always writing or creating or redesigning or whatever that is, it can really take it out of you. And for a small theater company like ours, I'm not pushing for a salary increase, but I see, when you see slightly larger companies who have a team of people working on something, you understand that, wow, it really does take 3 people to manage all of those things and to really make it hum. I think we do a pretty good job with the resources that we have. But it gets increasingly more challenging to keep up with all the different ways that you can communicate about a show. That's what I'd say. But I also work for a company that doesn't do shows in the summertime. So I get to breathe a little bit. And that's also something that I love about this job, is that when it's hard, but when it's not, it's very flexible. And I work with I work with a family. It's not, I'm not at a corporate desk every day. I'm recording this in a T-shirt, by the way, and and if I wore the same T-shirt to work tomorrow, no one would bat an eye. So I love the camaraderie. And I really do feel like we're a family. And so I wouldn't trade that for the world.
Yeah.
Well, we're
Same.
super grateful for how much you have learned how to do. You were a great marketing director when you started with Forward, and you have learned so many new skills. It's been really awe-inspiring and impressive to watch. And
Thank you.
It's fun making this podcast with you, and fun to have you be on this side of the microphone.
This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yay.
Thanks, Scott. I think we will say then that this is it for this episode of Theater Forward, a conversation about theater in Wisconsin, the Midwest, and America. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jen Uphoff-Gray.
I'm Julie Swenson, and I want to thank once again our colleague, Scott Haden. It's great to hear your voice on this podcast, and it is an absolute delight and privilege to work with you, Scott.
Yeah, I'll co-sign that. Although, which Scott Haden are we talking about? My job, as we sign off always, is to say our podcast is produced by Scott Haden. That's one Scott Haden. There's another Scott Haden that works in the Forward office. There's another Scott Haden who's occasionally still on stage. Scott Haden, people, is everywhere. Anyway, thanks to yet another Scott Haden, probably wearing a different T-shirt, although maybe wearing the same one so he can fool us. But thanks to him, you can follow this podcast and listen to this particular episode of the podcast at Facebook. That's at Theater Forward. Theater, as always, because there is, unlike Scott Haden, only one way to deal with theater, and that is spelled with an E-R.
And if you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. We would love to hear from you.
We're so grateful to have you listening, and we will be back soon for another Theater Forward conversation.